photo twice. I'm in the background of Rollie's photo.
Oh yeah.
Oh, look at that. Yeah.
It's like that.
So, hello out there on planet Earth, or maybe if you're on Mars. I think Mayor Giuliani was saying some of the votes could have come from Mars. So maybe some of you are from Mars. I don't know. Anyway, this is Andy Revkin, trying to stay sane. A little bit of a comedy of errors today. Trying to run my Earth Institute initiative on sustainability and communication webcast. Mondays are called Thriving Online, which is like how to deal with all the screw ups and the technology stuff and still get through life and make the world a little bit better. Today's session is on humor, and like there's so much around us that is not funny, like totally like the antithesis of funny, that it's hard to understand how humor can play a role. But there are many ways that we can use laughter, the connectivity that comes through disarming us around the issues that divide us. And you'll hear a lot about this from some very great practitioners and thinkers here this morning, and mostly doers more than thinkers. And we're going to start right in. Let me make sure. Again, I normally have headphones on, so you're probably going to hear weird feedbacky stuff, and just consider it like a bad joke. I'm going to introduce, today we're going to run through a couple of things with some people from the University of Colorado Boulder who have a fantastic, Inside the Greenhouse initiative there. Beth Osnes and Max Boykoff have really smartly dug in early on the role of performance and arts in driving progress around climate. And I really appreciate what they've done. Max's book, Creative Climate Communication, is a must read for anyone diving in this area. So it's great to have the Inside the Greenhouse crew here today. And they include Liana Nixon, who you'll hear about from in a second, Ben Stastny, and Beth Osnes, again, the sort of founding conspirator in that initiative. But the first half hour, we're going to focus on, and we're all in the conversation together. The first chunk of time here, we're going to talk a little bit with my friend Rollie Williams, who's here at the Earth Institute in our mostly virtual life, trying to gain a degree, a master's degree. In which one are you pursuing? There's like 20 different sustainability degrees.
Yeah, there's 20 different degrees and none of them talk to each other, so no one knows about anybody else. But I'm part of the, I'm part of the Climate and Society program. But there's a guy blowing leaves right outside this cafe. So
yeah, that's the comedy of errors.
That's why. Yeah, that's the comedy. I have to pay him $45 after this, but you know,
yeah,
it'll be worth it for the terrible sound quality. Yeah, I'm in the Climate and Society program. It's normally a course you can do it in 3 terms, but I'm taking 4 terms to do it because I wanted to take a couple extra law school classes. It's a nice program. It's gonna, hopefully when I'm out, I'll be I don't know about well-versed, but versed in climate science and also the levers that
all right.
climate policy.
And how did the humor come into your life? I'm going to show something that kind of...
How did the humor come into my life? Well,
as a component of how you think and work.
One day.
Here you are doing some very weird stuff.
Wow. A glowing endorsement from Andy Revkin. Very weird stuff. Thank you very much.
No, but weird is good. A friend of mine works at Netflix, and her job is to tag Indian movies with like descriptors, and she's had to fight for the word quirky as a tag. So when I say weird, I think of that not necessarily negative and quirky. So you tried to be kind of a kind of an Al Gore-ish figure doing sort of a version of Between the Ferns as a talk show with
I guess
Mamoudou, and you've got this cool video online.
Pitch.
Well, yeah, I know. Between the greenhouse.
That's
the
show around.
Yeah, dang.
And then you're using comedy. You try to explain carbon offsets recently in a video. I could show a clip from in a minute. If we'll skip that for now. So how did that come into like getting a master's degree and all that?
Sure. Yeah. So it actually was reverse. I was I moved to New York maybe 6 years ago to do comedy, to pursue comedy and do improv and sketch and some stand up, and I just out of happenstance I was performing at the Annoyance Theater in Brooklyn, and they had an open slot and they wanted me to pitch a show for that slot, and so I pitched this show that was like a drugged out, kind of stressed out Al Gore being like, are you paying attention now? Like hurricanes are destroying everything. And I fucking called it from the beginning. Don't forget, I called it. That was kind of the premise of that show. And then over the course of a couple of years, it just sort of grew into this talk show. And that's actually Mamoudou behind me in the picture there. Mamoudou is the DJ for that show. And then eventually I was doing that show for about a year and a half, and I realized, like, after doing enough research on Al Gore and climate change, I was like, oh, this is the one and only thing I should be thinking about forever. So I went to Columbia to get a degree in climate science and policy, and I want to use comedy to like lower the barrier of entry for people to understand how climate change works and how climate policy can be moved by humanity.
And we'll talk with Mamoudou in a second too, but do you find one thing that I've seen so far in the climate arena is that the comedy tends to be sort of within the bubble. In other words, it's for people who are already inside the greenhouse of concern around climate change. But is there utility and comedy that gets out into a wider audience, or this gets to like strategy and how do you can use comedy to create drive and momentum for your community, for your particular solution?
I mean, I think I don't know that anybody would say that climate change isn't a particularly dry topic. I think there's like a lot of tendrils of drama, baked into the concept, but it's mostly about how like a particular molecule is better at absorbing infrared radiation than others. It's like just kind of it's a dense topic, and I think if we want to communicate all of the different aspects of climate change to people and make it so that everybody really gets it, we got to do that in a lot of different ways, and sometimes that's with graphs and charts and essays or memes or and mailing list, or sometimes for me it's just like I want to try to make jokes about it and make it kind of like the way that John Oliver does it, except for worse than him. I want to do that.
And so let's center the conversation on Mamoudou. So Mamoudou, I had your pronunciation right. Njai.
Did it. Nailed it.
I got it right.
Nailed
so here
it.
I am, I was on YouTube the other day looking for people introducing you, and I think I had 3 different versions of your last name.
That's the game. The game is like which one is right, and if you select the right one, you get all the facts and information from me.
Yes. So how did you get into? You're a Martinian American. You're a filmmaker. You're a DJ, educator, comedian.
Yeah.
And how did that happen?
Purely
I mean, the climate part or the sustainability part.
Oh, really? It's purely just seeking the approval of my family. Just like trying to do every job possible to be like, am I gonna get a hug today? No, my family's really supportive. But yeah, I think that like it's what Rollie's saying is like any sort of communication, you need to meet people where they are. And I think that comedy, I think we're all desperately in need for a laugh. But I think that with a dense topic that is like science, I do other science communication around neuroscience and mental health as well. I think you need to understand that there's going to be the people that you're going to make jokes that are reading the New England Journal of Medicine. And then there's going to be some people who are just trying to like watch Netflix and get some facts off. And I think that in shows like the one that Rollie invited me to be a part of, there was an opportunity to find humor in this very big, it's like there's all these other topics that we need to deal with, but there's an umbrella topic that is exacerbated by these other things that we talk about, like race and sustainability and the convenience economy. So there's all these different things that you wouldn't think that contribute to the climate crisis that were interesting. And I think that the more voices, the more diverse the people behind the boards are on that, the more types of people you can talk to about a lot of issues.
I want to show just a tiny piece of something you did a few years ago on race, which for me captures some of the potential for disarmament that
I look
comes
like a
through.
Batman villain.
Oh, whoa. Something weird happened here.
Hey, there it is. Nice
Hey.
video, Mamoudou.
Hold on.
What a
video.
Now that is an average body.
All right. So in my experience, racist is one of the most triggering words for white people. But are all white people racist? Let me explain using science. Short answer, no. Long answer, yes, of course. A racist is defined as someone who feels discrimination or prejudice to people of a different race, or feels that one race is superior to another. You're probably already like, oh my God, but that's not me. Hold the fuck on, I'm not done. It's like 3 minutes left in this video. Chill. A lot of people are probably focused on the latter part of that definition, perceived racial superiority. But this behavioral neuroscientist is focused on the word prejudice. That word is the centerpiece by which the rest of this definition can exist. Fun fact, humans do have a tendency to create in-groups and out-groups, but they aren't born with prejudice. That's something that we learn. It's a product of nurture, not nature. What that means is that we learn it from the people we're around, the people that we're raised by, also known as social contact. Social contact to different people has been proven scientifically to improve cognitive development and cultural understanding overall. Inside prejudice is bias, or the inclination to have certain opinions based on your personal experiences. Whether you think that Drake and J-Lo go well together, or that the 1996 motion picture Space Jam is the best movie of all time, it is. If you're gonna at me, come bat me.
I love that. If you're gonna at me, come at me. Yeah. So, you know, when I was at National Geographic Society for a year, and just before that, they had done their big issue on race, which was very serious and actually very impactful. You know, it talked about their own racist history as a magazine and the society. But what you laid out there seemed like a really creative way to get science into a conversation and also sort of discharge things. You're kind of self-effacing. You're looking at yourself too through the videos. I encourage people to watch it. I'll tweet the link later. So is it, how much of that, what's the method like? You know, when you, this thriving online sessions are, not everyone's born to be a comic or to be a comic writer, but you know, if there's a certain way you break down a question, and this could be for Rollie too, and then we'll get into the inside the greenhouse stuff. Is there a methodology that's, I mean, if it's like magic tricks where you don't want to reveal the technique, that's fine. But no, I have a feeling there's things you could share. Maybe start with Mamoudou.
We signed an NDA.
Yeah. Talk about yes, Comedy International will take our families if we tell you anything about our
right.
Take my wife.
Yeah. Probably gonna take us. All right. No, you go first, man.
Oh no. Okay. Yeah. I don't know. I think. For me, it's like the process is I just like read and learn as much about the topic as I can right away without having like kind of an angle yet, and then build like, you know, like I would write an essay. I kind of like make a hypothesis, and then I just try to like write it in a way that is as funny as, you know, like I just try to think of like a funny situation I could be in, or like a funny like a hook or a metaphor or as much media as I can. I think like, for instance, in Mamoudou's video where he like yells at you for not liking Space Jam, which like, I mean, he's right, it's really good, but like, you know, he sort of builds in a runner. You know, Space Jam isn't related to the video indirectly, but by like repeating it a number of times, it's like a fun way to bring in like a fun thing and also like wrap it into the concept that he's talking about.
And Mamoudou?
Yeah, I always write from start with the issue and then find the funny in it. Always, and I think that there's so many different issues that are so interwoven that, you know, sometimes you can get lost in that for a second. But really focusing in on what is your main point and what are some references, some touch points that like get it in there. And I think that I always describe it as like you're Trojan horsing information to people, or putting like the medicine in the applesauce, like to make sure that your kid can like get their medicine. It's like you have to, no one likes just being yelled at. No one likes just like, I mean, except for me, I'm a big dweeb. I love reading so much, but like no one likes reading like technical jargon. I'm the type of person who goes down the jargon rabbit hole, trying to find out Latin roots and everything. But that's not everyone's game. But I think that everyone does want to know what's going on and how they can help. And I think that taking everything from the macro and making it personal in a way that they can either share the video or share the information or do something in their own life that causes a change and, you know, help them go on their journey at their own pace is the way that I do that. And I think that showing your own humanity and being like, yeah, I didn't know this, or hey, I had to learn all of this and I like to show it to you in this way so that way you can pass it on is the best way to get information out, as opposed to just like putting out blanket statements somewhere with no sort of scaffolding.
And how important is community? Like, you know, people don't realize sometimes behind John Oliver and Colbert and everybody, there's a whole writer's room and you're batting things back and forth. Obviously, then you have the community in the club. If you're performing in a club, there's either feedback or it isn't. Online, you get punished or rewarded. But when you're doing that process, which sounds kind of hard, when you say you actually do the hard part first, writing what's the issue? What do I see as the fulcrum points?
Well,
how important is community?
I went like the opposite route. I think Rollie, you went, I don't know what you did in undergrad, but then you ended up landing in comedy and then you ended up going into, you know, Columbia for all this. I started off my degrees in cognitive behavioral neuroscience. So like I wanted to always talk about these issues, and I specifically focused a lot of my research on prejudice and how like where that comes from and how that gets exacerbated and propagated across generations, et cetera, et cetera. And then it just took me into all these different directions. So I think the things that I wanted to talk about on stages were always issue based or always things that involve, you know, a common, you know, collective good or doing better in the world. And then, you know, community is important because you have to find people who, it's not that people that won't challenge you, but people who are trying to help you find your way in a way that everyone can get this information in a way that meets them where they are. And, you know, something you can't just like do the jokes that Rollie and I do in any random comedy club, because some people come in there for very specific jokes. But we were working with Caveat, which is a spot in New York City.
Oh, sure.
And yeah,
R.I.P.
R.I.P. But it was a wonderful place for people to go and watch shows that have a little bit more of a, you know, educational tinge to them. And I think that not everything needs to be beat you over the head with facts, but sometimes it's fun to take those big facts and break them down in funny ways. And watching random people get drunk at those shows and come up and talk about climate stuff with us, that was very fun. Those are big highlights of the pre-COVID world, you know.
In a second, we're going to get to the Inside the Greenhouse community, which obviously these questions resonate for you too. I wanted to ask one more question to Rollie and to Mamoudou about courage. I'm a songwriter, performing songwriter on the side. I speak a lot in public, and I've never really felt scared in those arenas. Although I did have a songwriting group I used to be part of where I'd put out a song and I would be really badly punished. But comedy feels to me like the ultimate scary thing, like stepping into that arena feels like a danger zone, unless you're Mark Twain or Mamoudou or Rollie so. What's the advice?
I just got into that.
I'm gonna call my mom.
Pretty heavy hitting group of three. Thank you. Yeah, I'm gonna call your mom too.
Yeah, please call my mom.
I don't want the International Comedy Federation to take us. Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think that it's like everything else. It's all about practice, right? Like you gotta just die 1,000 times and then you're less afraid of it. It's probably like MMA fighting. I'm not sure. I've never done it, but
that would be more dangerous.
I have to imagine. Yeah, it's like you have to. Once you, I've been like punched before, and I think my life before being punched and my life after being punched is different because you realize it doesn't hurt as bad as you think it's gonna hurt to get punched. So that's one thing. Another thing is like I think most comedians need a lot of validation, and that need for validation overrides the need for self-preservation in a lot of cases. So I think it's like everyone's got a preservation to validation threshold, and if for whatever reason you need people to hear what you have to say, like me, it's easy to get over that because the reward is greater than the potential damage.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So let's widen the conversation here a little. I'm really happy to have all of you here. I know, Mamoudou, you have to cut out around 1 Eastern time, but we can do more. I'd like to kind of dig in on these issues. I don't see them as one webcast. Oh well, we're done.
I think we can knock this one out.
Yeah, no, there's a process here, and it usually involves iteration. And well, what can we do better next time? I had a session here recently with an artist, a science illustrator, and a political cartoonist, which is very similar to what we're talking about here. There's like a track of learning that I think we're on. So hopefully you can come back. So Inside the Greenhouse, which you can find at insidethegreenhouse.org, is at the University of Colorado Boulder. I think, gosh, is it 10 years yet? Tell me it's not more than 10 years. That would make me... Beth, I don't know if you're... Maybe you can unmute if you're not... Oh, maybe I muted you. Did I mute you? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't do it
Silencing
punitively.
voices.
Wow.
That's
we have a
man.
soft start.
You're unmuted, yes.
Can you hear me now?
How long has Inside the Greenhouse been around?
It depends when you start counting. So I think we've been around 8 years for sure, 10 years if you include Max and I having a kind of a creative experimental start.
Yeah, I remember I was on the stage there for something you did.
Yes.
Must have been pretty early on.
Yeah, our first big thing was we had Jim Baylog come and in the same venue that we had you, and he did a thing on the art of chasing ice, and we did this big, huge embodied human glacier melting in front of Mackey Auditorium to kind of embody this experience of what global warming is really about. But then we had you, and that was great. You did your concert with your songs.
Trying to be, yeah. I've been punished online by being called a very serious person. That's a very bad thing on Twitter, a VSP. And so I do have a tendency to try to avoid being perceived as too serious, even though the subjects are super serious. And now it's a big program, right? You're doing all kinds of things. You come from the realm of dance and theater yourself.
Yeah, that's right. Theater and performance. And
you were on the show way back in April when we were in
with my dear friend Rollie. We'll have to get more involved. I'm anticipating we'll be online again.
You guys did a climate comedy video film festival, right?
Yeah, we have a yearly one that's usually in person, where we have our students performing stand-up comedy on climate. And but Rollie has won our competition. And this last year we had to do the whole thing online because of coronavirus. So we had you included. You were a comeback. You were included in that one. And then we had Andy and his song at the end, because it was the Liberating Carbon is a funny song. So we had that on too.
By the way, on Sunday, I want to ask Mamoudou one more question before you have to go. On Sunday, I had on a pretty prominent climate scientist, Ray Pierre Humbert, plays ukulele and accordion. The Sunday shows I do on the arts. And he said that Liberated Carbon inspired him to write a song. His ukulele, he played this version of MC only Ford 16 tons. It was you load 6 gigatons, and what do you get? Another year deeper into carbon debt. So I seem to have spurred. He said it was spurred particularly by my song. So that's another thing I think is really important here, is building a community. So you're sharing and iterating and tweaking things. So Mamoudou, we've heard COVID-19 famously has forced us all to be zoomified, and two-dimensional. And when you think about that, how does that change your approach to what you're doing?
What do you think?
There's like a liberating part of it,
good,
and
bad?
there's a nightmare part of it.
Oh, I have to make a game time decision on COVID. I'll say it. I'm anti. I think that For me, it's like there's always another way to change the message. I think that if we live in a world where there's thousands of languages, then you'll always be able to find another word, another way to say something. And I think that there's been a lot of ways that people have been able to adapt to things. I think that even Rollie, me, and Ben Wolcon, we were working on that pokey rap version of the different people in the House and the House or the Senate who like didn't who weren't like voting for, I can't even remember what it was, but like we found
it was all of the Congress people who had taken either $100,000+ from fossil fuel companies or were $1 million or more invested in fossil fuel companies. And it was not a short list.
It was not. That's why it was pokey rap. It was very long. But yeah, like we found another way. And I think that like most late night shows and other TV shows that have found ways to like adapt their production, I think that it requires you to find another way to get that information out. And I think that when you care about issues such as the climate crisis, racial justice, mental health, you'll find a way to, let people know it's important to you and it should be important to them. And I think that comedy is a great way because no one wants to be told, hey, recycle. But if you find a way to like make fun of them or make fun of yourself and them and then talk about like recycling or talk about, hey, maybe not using Amazon all the time and buying locally, finding ways to get that information out, you can always do it. There's always another way. I stopped doing Twitter, but I'll show up at your house with a mask on and be like, hey, what's all this?
You stopped. You're on. By the way, I should ask you briefly again before you go. Like, how do people best find you and keep up with what you're doing? You're on Instagram, I know, but what are the other ways?
The best way you can find me is to play the 1995 song "Space Jam" by the Quad City DJ. I was like, how did this happen? No, I'm not tweeting or doing Instagram for the rest of the year. I've been trying to like just detox my brain from social media, especially the election and everything that was going on with that. I was just like, I need to take a break. But you can find me on Twitter at Mamoudou and Jai, which is my first name, last name, no apostrophe, or on Instagram at Mamoudou About Nothing. And I'm always up to a new project. And hopefully one of these bad boys, these projects sells, these organizations pay me so I can make more content. Because I love making, climate, not even just climate, just like science communication content. I love doing it because I just love marrying the research and the jokes.
Well, we consider this just the beginning of a conversation. There's lots we're working on that I think we can work on together.
Absolutely.
Rollie as an interface. But no, I love what you're doing. And your focus on neuroscience and the basic understanding of how we absorb and reject information.
It's great.
A big chunk of what I'm working on is bigger than climate. It's the bigger question of the information environment and the infodemic.
Yes.
And like turning off your social media or using it strategically, trying to understand that new ecosystem of whatever it is, which is great. The great part is like we can all connect from wherever we are and we can connect. I've had Zambian musicians on my show and all kinds of stuff is possible. Yeah. The downside is it's built to distract and divide and confuse us. So your neuroscience background, let's talk.
Hey, listen, they had me in the first half, not going to lie. But I'm now getting off of social to take like detox breaks. And I would love to, talk about anything and ask Rollie. We talk about anything. So we will always find a way to make it funny, but also get the information out.
Mamoudou's always calling me at 2 a.m. to say, hey, let's talk about anything.
Let's talk about anything. Do it. I got my feet up in the air. Babysitter's club.
He's got his phone cord wrapped around his finger, and he's just
Oh, smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, something like that.
Right.
All right, guys.
Hey, great to see you. Great to get to know you a little bit.
Nice to meet everyone. Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Stay safe. Stay sane.
Absolutely. You too.
Be effective. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Be effective. That's a good sign off.
Well, try to be effective. It's all a journey. Like the show right now. Again, I've we've all had, we're all in a place where we have to be forgiving of each other. I think right now, these last few weeks and months and 4 years have been pretty calamitous. So let's get back to a little bit deeper on the climate side of things, perhaps. I want to show some imagery. Here's Liana Nixon, who we'll talk to now again with Ben and with Beth. photojournalist, documentary filmmaking. That sounds pretty serious. You've been to serious places like Antarctica, and tell me how that all wraps together with the humor component.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am a documentarian, filmmaker, photographer. I also am a grad student, and I've actually taken Beth Osnes and Max Boykoff's Creative Climate Communication course. So as a storyteller, I've been to places like the Arctic. I just came back after a 6-month journey. So as the world was falling apart, I actually was in the most northern quarantined place in the world, equipped with like a sauna and swimming pool and a lot of work to do. And so I was out there to capture a research expedition called Mosaic, which stands for the Multidisciplinary Drifting Observatory for the Study of Arctic Climate. And our goal was to collect the largest raw data set of the Arctic for an entire year. And this helps fill in the gaps of climate models that need to actually have a lot more information to accurately describe what's going on in the Arctic and how that impacts us. So yeah, as somebody who was a student of Beth's and taking these courses, I really wanted to also photograph the joy in such a polarizing situation of studying the Arctic. The Arctic is melting.
Sorry,
exactly. Right?
Beth, did you put a coat on out of sympathy for
right.
I mean, exploration?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, it's just that thing.
And
I have bad internet, so I'm using my neighbor's internet, and I get it better on the front porch. We just have so many people in our house.
Rollie can explain why he's sitting in a car. Or are you still in the car? Or?
Outside a car. I'm out in a cafe.
He and his was it girlfriend or wife?
She kicked you out. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, she booted me. She got COVID and then booted me.
They had conflicting results on COVID tests, which turned out to be. It turned out that the positive was a negative. But,
oh no.
Yeah, we got a false positive, but we got scared. I mean, it's funny in retrospect.
Yeah, so here back to the Arctic. It was so funny. I mentioned Antarctica with a polar bear picture.
That's fine. People confuse
one has Santa, the other doesn't.
And so when you think, Liana, about the landscape of communication impact, you know, doing filmmaking, documentary photography, storytelling, and then the humor part, what feels, what drives you the most, or what do you think the comedy part has shaped in terms of how you think forward, what projects to work on, the like?
Yeah, absolutely. So a really big focus point that motivates me in science communication, as well as being on Mosaic, was just capturing the joy of the scientists in this work. And it could actually be quite comical. I mean, we were all a community that was removed from the rest of the world, and we leaned on each other for so many things. And joy was a big provider, and also chocolate, in what continued to drive us in our work. And so this is a scientist who's playing with an inflatable shark, which is arguably a new Arctic species of shark, the most northern shark that's out there, I bet. And I mean, it was stuff like this, seeing scientists actually take a break from their work and play, being able to really kind of reflect on the situation that we were all in was really amazing. So,
yeah, having spent several days on the North Pole sea ice with in some situations that were not funny but also hilarious, like on a Russian helicopter where things were being held together with duct tape, and it was 20 degrees below zero, and we were stuck in a tent for 8 hours with no heat, and eating a 2-day-old frozen salmon sandwich. If you don't look for the comedy, you can get pretty grumpy. So field humor, I guess, is an important thing.
It is. I mean, that's how you survive. I mean, you're all living in like such tiny quarters. I understand the duct tape thing. I also found out that if your socks went missing, they probably ended up in the engine room for some odd reason to help soak up oil that was happening. I mean, but you just had to laugh about it because that's the environment that you were in.
So Ben, describe your work and how you're part of this crazy band of world changers.
Thanks, Andy. My work is pretty new. I'm in my first semester at grad school at CU Boulder, and Beth threw a bird costume on me, and we went to a farm and danced around, and that's how I've gotten involved so far. So, yeah, it's pretty exciting. I owe a lot to Beth so far in this early process, but I'm really, really eager to be thinking more about climate change and theater and improv and comedy, and so it's all very new.
And does that feel unnerving? Which is scarier, the hard part of your coursework or the fun part?
The hard part. I worked as an actor for several years in New York City, and now I have to shift into actual thinking and writing, and learning how to read again is a challenge.
So Beth, you're going to do a presentation or an exercise of some kind?
Yes, I am. So it's going to have to be, I'm going to assume that everybody who's joining us in this amazing webcast is also going to join in. Do you want me to do the active part now, Andy?
Yeah, let's go for it. Sure.
Okay, we just need to get moving a little bit, and it's a little cold for me out here. Looks like Rollie's having some nicer weather in New York.
We had glorious weather here in the Hudson Valley.
Yeah, we did yesterday, but now it's cold. So anyway, we're gonna a lot of the work that I do is I'm interested in getting folks the invitation, the inspiration, maybe some skills and tools to be able to start finding their own funny. I feel like a lot of the one-way communication that has been kind of the historical legacy of the ways that we've approached performance and communication is kind of over. And I think people want to be creating content themselves. And I think supporting people in creating their own comedy can be a fun way to go too. So in order to do this, we just need to I'm going to ask everybody who's joining me here, if you can stand up, if you wouldn't mind, please. Can everybody stand up and still be engaged in the way that they are? Rollie, can you still stay connected? Okay, so we're gonna first just shake. Yours is gonna be the highest stakes because you're outside in a crowded place. I am on my own front porch. We're gonna just shake it out, and we're just gonna all get our laugh going. This is selfish because I'm about to do a piece with Ben, so I'm gonna get our laughs kind of warmed up, and we're just gonna do a ha 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 as we shake it out. So everybody just do a ha 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 ha. Really shake it out, shake it out. Like a big guy, a little more.
Really good.
All right, thank you. Okay, now if I could get everybody to right arm up, and I'm going to ask you to imagine. Part of this is using your sensory imagination. Everybody's got a big juicy lemon in this hand. Nice juicy lemon. I'm going to ask you to squeeze that lemon in a moment, not yet. And I'm going to ask you to imagine that the sour is going down through your arm, through your body, all the way to your toes. And I want to see the sour. Okay, everybody? Together? Squeeze. Squeeze and down. Whew, good. Shake that one out. Thank you. The sour went through you. And now I'm going to ask everybody, take your left foot. I'm going to imagine that your left foot is barefoot, and you are going to step into, right now, a cow patty that has newly been put down. Have that foot gush into the cow patty, and I want the sensation and feeling and reaction of that to come up through your entire body. Have it travel up.
For me, it's usually dog shit.
Yeah, well, I'm from Wisconsin, so I went with the cow patty. Okay, now left hand up, everybody. Left hand up. In this left hand, I don't know why this just happened, but somehow a baby bird was just placed in your hand. I want the care and the travel through your entire body. Oh, what you got in your left hand, a little baby bird. And that baby bird now flies away. Oh, cool. Last one, right foot, everybody. Really engage that sensory imagination. That left foot is also barefooted. And your right foot is also barefooted. And you are in the sky and you are stepping onto a cloud. And you are balancing on that cloud. Everybody, 1 foot balancing on that cloud. And I want to see and feel that you are in the sky, getting risen up, rising up into the sky on this cloud. Oh my gosh, I'm getting tired. Oh, we're yawn, everybody yawn. Oh. You're going to come in, snuggle into the cloud. Now you've got a little seat in the cloud too. Snuggle in, everybody, snuggle in. And everybody reach back, grab some of that downy cloud, pull it over yourself till it's a nice warm blanket, and you fall asleep in the sky. Okay, good. Wake up, everybody, wake up. Okay, this is actually some of the warm-ups that I use. I just did a workshop with the Earth Day folks who do the college outreach to all the different organizations that exist in all the different campuses across the country. And I did a workshop for them on climate comedy. So this was just a few little teasers from the workshop that I did with them. And it's really to give the power back to the people, to let people find their own funny and have student and citizen generated climate comedy.
I like that, the engagement part. And again, that you could do that in a room of people, obviously, in a post-COVID world, if there ever is one.
Well, I mean, we did that one online. Yeah.
This seems to be an exercise that would be very valuable for anyone in any Zoom meeting to do periodically. How much of that, I wish Mamoudou was still here, because the neuroscience of this is important too. I know. That getting physical in a way. Yep. You, Beth, obviously as a choreographer, would know this too. How much does what's the value in that?
Well, I mean, I think that there's a couple things. There's just the value of just, there's this idea that we think with our minds, but actually learning is embodied, knowing is embodied. We learn through metaphor. We learn through, the embodiment of the flesh. There's all this science out there that as we learn the brain, we understand that we actually learn and know through our bodies. And, we experience and impact climate primarily through our physical bodies. And so it's through our bodies that we're going to kind of come back and join in and find the ways to resolve this and to find our wholeness in this. So the body there becomes super interesting. And also it's just like, if you're trying to share awareness, it's like embodying concepts is beneficial for learners. That's a study that we've really leaned into a lot, that you really get something and you retain it much differently if you've experienced it through your body at the same time that it's a unified thing that you're intellectually aware and curious at the same time. So that integration and that inclusion of the body is really important to me. So that's the main thing I'd say.
Rollie, to some extent, this relates to your inconvenient, not an inconvenient, your Al Gore thing. You're not Al Gore thing. In other words, you do an interview.
Climate Town or an inconvenient?
No, the Al Gore thing. I can't remember what it's called.
You mean it's not the Marvel Universe one, is it?
The Inconvenient Talk Show.
That's the very same.
Talk part is essentially an interaction. It's physical. You're facing someone. You're talking to them. They're worried and scared about being funny or not. How important is the dialogue part there in kind of breaking new ground?
I mean, I think that particular section, I don't know. I feel like, I think everybody that I was able to talk to was really lively and fun. I think just trying to focus on it like we were just trying to have a fun conversation where, I kind of tried to throw in little bits and blips here and there. But for the most part, it's just like two friends, kind of riffing. I think that's like when people are comfortable. I think it's just like Beth said, when people are more comfortable and they're like embodying themselves, they're just like gonna be funnier and more real and more vibrant. And I think like the trick is just to get people to have fun on stage. And part of that is having Mamoudou in the background, and anytime he's like got an entire soundboard and he can like drop sound cues, and the audience is laughing and people are drinking and having a good time, and it's framed around like kind of just like, hey hey, let's talk about your work and let's have fun doing it. That was my strategy. I'm not sure if it always worked, but it seemed to work for a lot of times.
It feels like something I still want to integrate into these some track of sessions I'm doing on here, where maybe I could bring you on sometime to do parts of what I'm doing here now. I call them a difficult conversation. A week ago, we had the inaugural difficult conversation, and it was amazing. It was not humorous, but it was inspiring. A guy I've known for decades, a songwriter who's Black, a storyteller, and a songwriter. He connected with his half of his family that he had only realized existed as of a decade or so, who are white, and they all descend from a slaveholder, a slave owner, Wickham, one of the ones whose statue was toppled last June, and he has found a way to talk to the white side of his family through engagement over time, and it was a powerful conversation. We had him on with his one of his distant cousins who's white, talking about their path forward. I could see another form of difficult conversation event here where the people are in the conversation are very different on some aspect of climate policy. Someone who hates nuclear but wants to have zero carbon, and someone who's pro-nuclear. And have it not be a debate so much as let's just talk and then figure out a next step here. If we want to have zero carbon emissions from energy later in the century, I think we all, everyone agrees on that, but why are we fighting over these things? And I don't know if comedy can play a role in breaking some of those barriers.
Andy, I have a story based on that. We did a project in the Navajo Nation in the Eastern Agency, and we used shadow puppet theater, but it was solar-powered shadow puppet theater. And we had students identifying a energy issue that was important in their area. And then we did a forum so that we could have all the stakeholders who, had a stake in this issue come to consensus. And it wasn't a debate. It was, how do we come to consensus? And so we had this forum, and it was so funny because people were the voice of the children, or there was somebody who was the embodiment of coal. And they were talking about making a solar farm in their area near Theroux, New Mexico. And all the way that they ended up talking, it ended up being a total comedy. And the students were released of some of their inhibitions because they were behind a shadow screen doing these puppets. And puppets are already kind of funny anyway. And, and they had their cheat notes written on the back of their little puppets. And so I think there's a lot of ways that comedy can get in here and be activated to help people really engage with these. And these were, high school students, that's a tough crowd. And they were engaged and finding the funny in their own representation of very serious views about really serious consequential local issues that they identified.
Well, that gets back to what Mamoudou was saying about the neuroscience of just actually being in the same room as people. Breaking down barriers, just getting comfortable with the humanness of the people on different parts of a conversation or a debate about something as a first step toward progress. Actually, on this conversation, it was yesterday on my music session, the storyteller and songwriter, Reggie Harris, the Black songwriter, he also described a situation a few weeks ago where there was a Black Lives Matter, demonstration on a village green in upstate New York, and at the same green at the same time there was a MAGA demonstration. And he walked over at one point. He got into a pretty heated discussion with one of the MAGA folks, and then Reggie said, I was checking my own emotions and suddenly realized how I was contributing to division, and I just stopped and I said, my name's Reggie, what's yours?
It's cool.
And just that one thing. Then the other guy said, my name's Joe. And it broke their pattern. It broke their reflex first. You're that sign, and allowed them to kind of start to interrogate each other's human nature, which was really cool. And what you were just saying about finding your funny feels like a a good practice going forward as a way to discharge your own sense of, sometimes your own sense of urgency or anger or whatever. I don't know if that's part of it
Well,
too.
I think funny of your funny is your place where you have contradictions, where you're not fully resolved, where there's playfulness happening. Like your funny is that place where you're willing to be not rigid, but you're in this kind of double meaning place where you're like figuring it out. That's where the funny is. It's on the edges.
Yeah. There's an Earth Institute graduate, Deborah Castellano, who has weighed in the comments on Facebook. I pointed to her blog, which is here.
Great.
So people can go back to this afterwards once it's archived and find. And
Great.
she was saying, she was asking where, she's in the Hudson Valley, and she was saying, where was this? Whoops, that's not the one I wanted to show you. Here we go. When I was describing the MAGA rally and the BLM rally on the same green, she says, it must have been Chatham or Kinderhook. Well, Deborah, it was actually Cobleskill. But I think that's, that same thing is happening everywhere. People are running to the ramparts with their signs, figuratively or literally. And it feels like there's all kinds of debates about true fascism, when something is just bad and has to stop. That's one thing. But there does feel to me to be an opportunity here to figure out a way to put down the sign for a minute, or put something funny and disarming on the other side of the sign, maybe, like your name, as a starting point to getting things better. Rollie, can we talk about your latest video push? Let's just talk a little bit about Climate Town and what you're doing now. Oh, did I mute you? I think I muted you. Yeah, I muted you.
Yeah,
you
muted me absolutely rightly. There's a very intrepid doorman over here who, the second a leaf falls down, he is on it with a leaf blower. I gotta say, it's not the most efficient way, one leaf at a time, but it is effective. So congratulations to him for his amazing ability to produce noise. He's a small guy. Ooh, and I got a moped next to me. It's a sound garden, baby. All right. Well, the moped's moseying on. Yeah. So I'm doing this series called Climate Town. The premise of it is just to sort of demystify, like different deep dive elements of climate change. So the first one, and also there's like a bazillion interesting stories within the world of the climate crisis, and it's just a matter of like picking them and then slaving over a script for a few weeks and then like shooting it. And the first episode we shot was about the idea of the carbon footprint and how like the concept of the carbon footprint was developed by British Petroleum to get people to stop blaming big oil and start blaming each other and themselves, which is like a very psychotic and sadistic and hilariously effective way to shift to blame from big fossil fuel industry. And like it's so insidious that a lot of environmentalists didn't even know. Like when you say, oh, lower your carbon footprint, shrink your carbon footprint, that's actually the literal words of the enemy coming through you because they were so effective with their dissemination strategy. So try to stop saying carbon footprint if you can, although it's sort of a little bit been retaken as a term. But yeah, so like
I'm going to show a little bit of it. I'm not going to. I'll let you.
So this one is about. Go ahead.
But I'm not going to play the audio, so you can just kind of describe in your own words.
Okay.
So how did you choose this? How did you choose this particular setup? Basically, I think it's clever because you're sort of you're the pitch man.
Yeah. Yeah, the premise of this one is a little different. This is about carbon offsets. So there's all these, like big fossil companies and Amazon and Microsoft and even Shell, like these companies are saying, hey, we're going to solve climate change. We're finally taking it seriously, and we're going to solve climate change by using carbon offsets, which it turns, I nailed that timing actually. And it turns out carbon offsets cannot solve climate change. Like we've built up a carbon debt, like a carbon offset, even in the most effective way it's used, can only move the needle to like not increasing our debt, but our debt is what's going to swamp developing countries. and it's being used as a smokescreen to sell more fossil fuels and for businesses to continue business as usual. So
I love the. By the way, I particularly love the bathtub. I wrote about the whole bathtub concept way back when John Sturman at MIT was using that as a way to describe the accumulating CO2 and the fact that it doesn't just dissipate like soot from a smokestack. It's cool.
Oh yeah, and one thing I'm particularly happy about this. I did a little math, and it turns out the amount of CO2 that just British Petroleum is responsible for every year is the equivalent weight of every car and truck and human being in America. Every year, they put that much weight of CO2 into the atmosphere. Every year, one company.
So that gets back to when you and Mamoudou were talking about the practice, you kind of had to assemble the facts and write. So did you start the same way he was describing, where you start with the actual facts, you assemble them, and then you think about the funny part?
Yeah, I mean, this particular video took me like a month of just research, because carbon offsetting, I talked to a bunch of professors at Columbia, and I read a bunch of white papers on carbon offsets, because I think the worst thing you can do is get it wrong, because then you're just disseminating misinformation or worse, disinformation. And I don't want to be responsible for that kind of bullshit. So it just took me, maybe 100 hours of reading to really get my take on carbon offset correct before I tried to write the script. But then I kind of had the concept in mind of like, I'm going to pitch it as all of the industries, and I want to go to the beach, and we had planned to do more shooting at the beach, but then our camera died, and so we had to do this. Yeah, this premise is a carbon offset is like if you wanted to cheat on your wife, but it was bad, so you paid somebody not to cheat on their wife, and then you cheated on your wife. That's what a carbon offset is. And there's still one net wife being cheated on, and we're gonna we need to bring the amount of wives cheated on to zero before our wife burns our house to the ground. That's the kind of overarching metaphor of carbon offset and climate change.
I used to bring
So if you haven't seen this video, the just the video portion without the audio does not make a lot of sense. So I would encourage you to either completely expunge what you're seeing from your mind, or watch the video with the audio. But don't leave it here. That's like a naked person with just their shirt on. It just doesn't.
Well, but that has a certain attractor appeal too. Even
thank you very much.
So it sounds like there's a lot of work that goes into this. I'm just tweeting now. Damn, comedy is hard, says Rollie Williams. You have to do. It's not just standing up and trying to be clever. You have to kind of get things right.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like the comedy part's, I think the easier part. But I don't know. I think when John Oliver started last week tonight, I think that is the perfect case study in the fact that you enough people working on a single issue who are funny can make the issue both funny, palatable, and informative. And I think that is like my North Star. And I don't have the team and I'm not as funny as literally everyone writing on that show, but probably some of the sound people. But I have time on my hands and I have the information now. So it's kind of just me trying to chip away at this.
That's pretty cool. And Beth, if you could kind of give the overview of the Inside the Greenhouse project, and I don't know if you or Max is not on today, can kind of convey how much interest there is in creative climate communication as opposed to some of the other approaches that are out there. Is this a thing?
Yeah, and I think that we're really going against that idea that the information deficit model, that if people just had more scientific information, of course they'd be making these pro-environmental choices in their lives, and that would be deeply embedded in their choices and their purchasing. And we find that that's just not true over and over again. So it seems like our communication strategies have to be in line with what we know from the social sciences. And I think, if anything, Max being such a strong social scientist, we're really trying to take all this insight into human behavior and put it into effective climate communication. And we're really trying to tell a new story that kind of shows up in your life experience in a way that doesn't just get relegated to the already established defenses that you have that are ready to block out any kind of engagement with climate, because you've already got your mind made up. And it's really these creative ways of, like, if I came to you and said, hey, Rollie, how's the fishing going? And, like, we engage in this whole story around fishing. It's, you get blindsided, you don't know. And it's not even being sneaky, but it's in this really, I think, authentic attempt to find what unites us above what divides us. What do we care about in terms of our common shared home? And how are we connecting on that in ways that are going to ensure the well-being of things that we all mutually care about together? So I think that it's that creative element, is that imaginative, is finding new strategies, new tactics, new approaches that are going to really be effective. But it's really all about, still at its heart, communicating around climate. And I think that the key here is communication doesn't have to mean that we're always the one communicating. Communicating also involves listening and being in authentic dialogue and trialogue and groupathog and all that things, so really figuring out ways to be together creatively.
Just that first step of convening, and in a disarming way, feels like an important part of this.
Yeah, I'm doing a whole project this summer that Ben was involved in too. It was around young women, and we had this whole thing around barn swallows, and they got deep into finding their friendship and shared human story of migration with barn swallows. And it was very funny, and it was all about climate, but we almost never used that word. So we find that in successful climate communication is that you don't go run around waving a flag called climate, because that's just a divider. It's historically a divider. Right. And I think that you can, climate change by nature of what it is, it's so multifaceted. It has so many things that are driving it and that are associated with it, that you can just go to those things and you don't have to talk about that umbrella term.
Yeah, and I want to bring in, to widen the landscape even further, because again, for the first 5 months of this webcast, I was really focused mostly on the pandemic and the infodemic, as it's called, by the infodemic around the pandemic. And here's there's a whole community that I've been introduced to, and he couldn't get on the show today, but Pablo Suarez works with Red Cross International, and using comedy and humor. He's done a really good TED talk, which a TEDx talk, which I encourage people to see. And here he's laid out in this tweet some, the disasters are collaborating better than we are. Totally true. I'll show you. Whoops, I had this bigger. There we go. Yeah, the coronavirus is kind of winning. I tried to create a coronavirus and a SARS-CoV-2 Twitter ID. I was going to do this one day with like a little animated virus to give the world its impression of what's going on, which is like, it's very happy. We're enabling it. And I haven't seen enough of that. There's good stuff going on, and here Pablo is one of the hashtags to follow is humor, spelled the British way, engenders trust. I think that's one thing that we've all been talking about here this morning, this afternoon. Humor engenders trust. It's a way to break down barriers. But I encourage people to look at his work too, to see how what we're talking about in the context of climate has much wider applicability. And there are folks in other countries working on this too. So I think, again, this is just sort of the early days of moving from what we know we can do to what we actually can do, to building a community that's really broad, so that people can come online, given that we're more online than ever, and partner up and have a writer's room, or create your kind of space for you to communicate, connect with a cartoonist. I'll just bring up that example of Michael Mann, the climate scientist, who's very serious and passionate and in your face as an individual. He did that book with Tom Tolles, the Washington Post cartoonist which I think took it in a new direction potentially. So it feels like there's a lot to do here. We have a few more minutes. I'm not going to go fully till 2 o'clock, till the turn of the hour, but I'd like each of you to think about anything you've heard about in the last hour, or anything that strikes for you as a personal next step, or a need. Who do you not have in your Zoom box, or in your email chain, or in your world generally, who could help you do your thing? So I guess we'll start with Liana. Thinking about where you are as a young filmmaker in a world, by the way, also where so much is disrupted. What's your path going forward?
Yeah.
Or need? What's your need?
Or need. Okay. Well, actually, being gone for so long from my community that's been here has been really revitalizing to actually come back and revisit, to catch up with Beth and what she's doing, to really collect perspectives and to help process what I've seen at least the past 6 months. I'm about to be producing a planetarium film that's education based about Arctic climate system and mosaic. And it's important that we have this greater perspective, not just looking at the science, but looking at the joy, looking at how we can humanize it so that it drives curiosity. And yeah, it's been great to be back and hopefully push forward in what that means.
You're muted.
See there, I'm punishing myself.
Muted.
I was muting myself. Because I think our heating oil truck is delivering the fuel that keeps us warm through the winter in our 150-year-old
Heating
house.
oil?
Yeah, there's no natural gas here, and heating a 150-year-old house with electricity, whether it's solar or not, is simply not possible. So that's part of the unfunny reality of the climate challenge. But I was going to say, Liana, I was asking if you're using the stuff you shot during your trip for that project.
Yeah, absolutely. So I walked around with a giant spherical camera that does planetarium 360 footage, which was so it'll all be in there. Also, other scientists who used it are contributing, and another filmmaker named Amy Richmond. It's gonna be great.
Has the online reality changed that process for you in a positive or negative ways?
I haven't made a decision about it yet, because I was here during the beginning of the first coronavirus wave. So I was there kind of seeing how that culture was being created of coronavirus, and now coming back to it and whatnot. I'm just adapting. I still think it's really weird that people don't walk around with masks sometimes. I'm still in that first wave mentality, where everybody was just terrified. So I'm trying to get over those anxieties and catch up with the rest of the world a little bit.
Yeah, well, it would be good if the rest of the world...
They should still be wearing a mask.
Right? Right? Yeah.
You're right to be why are you not wearing a mask on the street, Boulder?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just pure fear.
And to say it was
spiking in Colorado, isn't it?
Oh yeah, we got it bad.
It's bad.
Yeah, UC Boulder has had a bad experience, right?
So
Ben,
see you, baby.
See you. I know. I guess I always. Sorry.
Go Bucks.
I should punish myself again.
I went there for one semester.
So Ben, in your life, thinking about the comedy and connectedness and how that relates to the inquiry you're doing in science and in spreading it to the world, what are your challenges or opportunities that that weren't there a year ago?
Yeah, well, I'm so new. I'm just eager to learn all of the language, meet the scholars, meet the practitioners, meet the performers who are doing this work, and to learn from them. I always knew climate change was a big deal. It was always the thing I cared about, and I didn't know how to pair that with theater, which is what I'm so passionate about. So it seems like there's a huge space opening up to be doing this really important work, and to do it in ways that are fun and funny and engaging, because like what we've said this whole time is that the world is so depressing right now that we have to laugh so we don't cry. And honestly, how can it get any more satirical? I mean, we may as well have done this in front of the Four Seasons landscaping building, because it doesn't get funnier than that. So.
By the way, my younger son just noticed that they've become a merch vendor. They have T-shirts, and that the Four Seasons landscaping has dived in. They have something about raking, and I said to him,
I believe it's Four Seasons total landscaping.
I believe you're right. So get those T-shirts right now. And one of them is about raking, which I think is funny because of Trump's fascination with raking forests to keep them from burning.
Okay, all right. Oh yeah.
So Beth, I was zoning out on the fact that you have something to present, an actual performance.
You were a good excuse, because as performers, we're running out of performance opportunities, so you can get a little rusty. So it was cool that you asked me to do this. And I had this piece that I have a file that I'd been working on for a while around climate change becoming the 11th commandment. And it was just kind of laying, like sitting around suffering from lack of attention. So I dusted it off and got a version ready for Ben and I to share with all of you today.
Great. How do
Are we ready?
Proceed?
We're ready. Sure.
All right.
I'm
gonna start with this. Beep 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 beep. In response to breaking news that an 11th commandment has been recently adopted by the pan-Abrahamic community, Christians, Jews, and Muslims have united to adopt this new addition to the first 10. What is it, and how is it for this new commandment to be so newly minted a sin? Here with us live is global warming. Glad you could join us today, GW. It's going to be a sensational show.
Thanks for having me.
And can you give us the exact wording of you as a sin?
Sure. Thou shalt not contribute to global warming.
This stunning announcement was forecasted by the Pope's 2015 release of a theological text, Our Common Home, that thoroughly examines the impacts of climate change on the poorest who did the least to cause it. It links rampant, unchecked consumerism and capitalism to the degradation of the Earth's many systems upon which we and our animal brethren rely for life. God damn it! Who wrote this? The earnest intern? Now get that kid delivering coffee, not writing my copy. This is deadly. Thou shalt not kill my ratings. Okay. Let's get to the juicy parts. The critics are saying that you lack the qualities a sin needs to change human behavior. They say that the sin of global warming doesn't have immediate consequences. What do you have to say to these charges?
I'd say they're absolutely right. A useful sin has immediate consequences. You kill somebody, they call you a murderer, and you go to jail. You dishonor your mother and father, your mom gives your LPs away to the thrift store, and you don't get to live in the basement anymore. You bear false witness, they call you a liar, and they are elected to public office. I don't have any of these immediate consequences. I can't keep up with these more well-established sins.
This brings up another point. Where do you draw the line, global warming? How do I know when I've committed you? It seems like just living contributes to global warming. I mean, we all exhale carbon dioxide, which is a greenhouse gas. So what? Is breathing a sin? Or I could accuse my grandmother when she's driving her car to church of the sin of global warming?
No, you're right. I'm a slippery slope. That's why I'm having such a hard time getting any traction. And it's mostly those pathetic Prius driving junior varsity sinners who think of me. It's the hardcore Hummer spewers of emissions that don't even give me a second look. Recently a casting director alluded to the same thing. about why I wasn't being cast in the leading role in any movies. She said I have a dilemma of representation. Sure, some people think that they've made a movie about me, disaster films with seawater rise and huge storms that won't let up, but it's the individual weather events that get the most pow. The overall trends, which is more accurately what I am, it's just not as sexy at the box office. To be the major twist in a great film, you need to completely derail somebody's life. Sure, in the long term, in about 40 years, I'm going to be the most badass, earth-shattering sin this world has ever seen. But until then, I'm sitting here misunderstood and neglected.
Well, did you ever think of asking any of the other commandments for help getting started?
Yeah. Well, thy neighbor's wife was over the other night trying to cheer me up. She said that undressing by the window helps with her sin appeal, but I'm not really sure that applies to me. Before leaving, she said, "Buck up. You're one of us big commandments now. You're going to soar." And I said to her, yeah, for some sins, the sky's the limit. But for me, I'm saddled with oceans, polar ice caps, and tropical forests too.
Well, global warming seems like you're having a tough start. I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more from you as the immediate consequences ramp up from continued emissions, unsustainable agricultural practices, and rampant consumerism. I think you, as a sin, have a lot of widespread regret to look forward to.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. But I was, truth is, hoping to be a bit more of a deterrent than a bummer.
Well, who knows? After this last week, anything's possible. Give it up for our latest commandment, everybody. Global warming.
Thank you. Thank you. The end.
That was great. So, yeah, so that's like a segment of Rollie's show, but where global warming is the actual guest. That's good.
Yeah.
Let's bring in Liana too as we come toward a close. So that's we did a play on here. I think she's online right now. I see Karen Malpede posted a comment. Just creating a unit on climate or eco art for my environmental justice students at John Jay College. She's going to link in the show. Karen is a playwright who I wrote about maybe 2015. She did a play about climate science, focused sort of on Jim Hanson's story. And then she did a play this year that debuted just before COVID exploded called Other Than We, which was a pretty dark comedy. I guess, yeah, I'd say it's partially comedic, in which humans are at literally the end of their road. The overheated planet, we're living in domes, excluded populations are outside the dome and struggling. And they're kind of cobbling together a version of our species using CRISPR kind of technology that has the traits we lack: empathy, foresight. And it was really cool. So, and we did a reading of it on the webcast. So you're the second such performance, and that's really cool.
It's great.
And Ben, you've got style. I like it.
Thanks,
you.
Andy.
Yeah, that's kind of.
Yeah.
He's one of the many performers, professional actors who grad school looks good, and it's like an option when live performing is so at risk right now. So it's an incredible. The timing was perfect for us to be able to get Ben to come and study with us.
That's great. Well, I'd love to think about doing another iteration of that going forward. If you have some other script you're working on, if you want to test drive something here, shop it on Sustain What, that would be fine by me.
Great.
And the same, Liana, I'm happy to help sustain the focus on the film you're doing, that museum piece, and just stay in touch about other questions. This Thriving Online Monday sessions are just part of what we do here. And I wanted to show, of course, I can't find the slides. Buried in my computer. Maybe this is it. No, that's not it. Hold on one second. There's something I want to show just at the end, because we're kind of toward the end here. Seeing what, 11? It's here somewhere, I promise. Yeah, we're going to focus on, come on, computer. This will be funny. Ragged, but funny. Hopefully funny. And And that's not what I wanted to show.
That's funny.
Let's try it again. Stop screen sharing. Start screen sharing. You have to be very methodical in StreamYard. Here we go. So, and this, of course, should be showing you the slide, not just the here we go. So on Wednesday, the topic will be kind of unfunny. It's like, how do we make progress in deep uncertainty? Deep uncertainty sucks, but it's a profoundly basic characteristic of the world we're all living in right now, where we don't know yet, even now, whether there'll be a reliable vaccine in time to stem COVID as we think we would like it to be stemmed. So anyone who thinks they're waiting for a vaccine should probably be thinking more actively about what do you do in the meantime. The Society for Decision-Making Under Deep Uncertainty, deepuncertainty.org is their website. You know, there's something funny even about saying those words, like that there's a website called deepuncertainty.org.
Mm-hmm.
But it's part of the world we face right now. And
Mm-hmm.
that's Wednesday's discussion. And Friday, we'll be talking about much more serious issues. The Biden administration, presuming that it becomes the presidency, how you return us to a more database risk response and decision-making process. Sundays, as always, will be music and the arts, a little bit tuned into what we're talking about today. What are the paths beyond just conveying information in a conventional way that can make progress on a turbulent, fast-forward planet wrapped in a pandemic, overheating? What do we do with that? So that's what we do here on this webcast. Thanks for being here today, and also to
Thanks for having us.
Rollie Williams
thank you.
and Najai,
Yeah,
whose name I just mispronounced again because I saw too many ways to pronounce it. And this Sustain What thing is a global online conversation identifying solutions to the complicated, shape-shifting, and epic challenges of humanity's great acceleration. That's the last half century or so in which we were in this great Zoom mode, lots of progress, lots of impacts. And now the virus has kind of put us in the great pause. What happens next is deeply uncertain. Tune in Wednesday, but very important to dig in on. A prime focus here is making sense of and getting the most out of the planet's fast-forward information environment. It's the one Earth system changing faster than the actual environment. And that's a good thing because it's allowed us to connect and share in ways we never thought of were possible. But it's also bad because the systems we're using mostly are designed to hijack, confuse, distract us. So there's lots of work to be done. It's part of my initiative at Columbia University, building it's the initiative on communication and sustainability. How do we make information and connectivity matter? As soon as we're done, share the link you've been watching on with friends and circles far and wide. Get in touch with ideas. See that distracting scrolling info bar at the bottom on ways to do that, to get in touch with me, to provide feedback. Thanks again to the crew from Boulder and thereabouts, Beth, Ben, Liana.
Can I also put one shout out, Andy?
Yeah, of course.
That Ben and I, and maybe Liana would join in too, but we'd really be interested in offering there's a workshop that we have that would be happy to work with any groups to get folks experiencing climate comedy for themselves and integrating that into their own work around climate communication and environmental work.
How do people find out about it?
Go to insidethegreenhouse.org at University of Colorado Boulder, or you can just look for Beth Osnes at colorado.edu. There we are. And you can just contact us there. If you go to the About, you'll see who we are, and you can contact me directly.
Great. And what's that called again? Basically,
it's a climate comedy workshop.
Workshop.
When I did it for the Earth Day folks, we did it in about an hour and a half, but we can accordion it in and out, whatever.
Well, I could foresee the merits in doing one with the Earth Institute.
That'd be great.
Our communication network. Climate comedy workshops. Unfunny, funny, productive conversations and exchanges and performances. Thanks again. This was great.
Thanks, Andy.
I'll do this again.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Take care.